I've been thinking about where to start this story, and I've decided I'm going to start with that Friday in April. I may be jumping around a bit from place to place, but let's start with that Friday. It was a Friday afternoon, a little after 5, and I was done with work for the week. Oregon weather in April can be unpredictable, but today was gorgeous. Almost 70 degrees, sunny, not a cloud in sight. I was in a good mood. The work week was over, and then there's this beautiful weather. What am I going to do this weekend? And then my mood soured. I had no plans, no dates, no things to do. I've been divorced for 3 years. I'm currently 28 years old, and I'm not dating anyone. I've tried online dating, but no luck. Just a waste of money. Most of my friends are married, and the couple blind dates they have asked me out on have been unsuccessful. My ex is in a solid relationship with a woman, and they are probably my closest female friends. The thought pops into my head. What is wrong with me? As I pulled up to the house, I felt better for a moment as I looked at the structure. Through my boss, I got a great deal on the house. It was definitely a fixer-upper, and I had spent a lot of time getting it in order. I made progress. The 1950s-era modern house was a restoration project, and I spent a lot of time and money to get it to the condition it was in now. My connections in the lumber business helped. I got home, grabbed my running gear, and went to change. I looked at myself in the mirror. 6 feet tall, 190 pounds, not a plank, but my abdominal muscles certainly showed. In the words of my ex, I looked pretty good. So what was wrong with me, and how come I hadn't had a single meaningful date in months? I started to get depressed and went for a 5-mile run. I always feel better after a workout, and I was enjoying a beer in the late afternoon sun on my back patio when my phone rang. It was my ex-brother-in-law, Mike. Hey, Cam, how's it going? Mike handles the finances, and what little money I have, he takes care of. He's very nice. His wife, Megan, is beautiful, fun to hang out with, and keeps his huge ego in check. What do you have for tomorrow? Knowing I had nothing, but not wanting to admit it, I said I was busy, but I had some flexibility in my schedule. Don't tell me the old man is making you work on Saturday. A little backstory. I work at Specialty Timbers. Mike's dad, Ted Robinson, is the owner and my boss. My ex, Kimberly, is the bookkeeper, Mike's sister, and Ted's daughter. Mike didn't go into the logging business, got his MBA, and now has his own investment business, Robinson and Associates. When my mom and sister and I were growing up, we weren't exactly poor, but we flirted with that socioeconomic strata. In high school, for anything beyond the basics, I had to pay for it myself. After junior high school soccer season, I went to a counseling center and found a job opening at a company located a bike ride away from my mom's house. I knew that if I ever needed a car, no one would help me pay for it. That Tuesday afternoon at 4 o'clock, I walked through the front door of Specialty Timbers for the first time. It was an open office with windows to the warehouse store in the back and 3 private offices to my left. I checked my address book and asked to see Mr. Hanratty. 10 minutes later, an older, short guy with long hair falling in his face came up. I'm Skip Hanratty, and held out a big, rough hand that was missing part of his index finger. We walked into one of the offices, with folders, magazines, catalogs, and blocks of wood everywhere. He sat down at his desk, put his feet up, and asked me what I knew about the logging business. I replied, "Not much," which probably wasn't the best answer if I wanted the job. "Then why are you wasting my time?" I was nervous and scared and didn't know how to answer, and he just stared at me. Finally, I said, "Mr. Hanratty, I need a job, and I promise you I will work hard." He looked at me for about 30 seconds without saying a word. I was thinking about what other jobs were on the bulletin board at the counseling center when suddenly he said, "Come back tomorrow at 3:30 and be ready to work." I was shocked, stood up, shook his hand, and left. I noticed a tall, balding man poke his head out of the last office and look at me. I never imagined how my life path would change. So, back to that April Friday as I sat on the patio talking to Mike. I'm not working this weekend. I just have a lot of things I need to get done in time. Oh crap, Tomorrow is Saturday, and there's an event at the fairgrounds, and I have to be there. Megan has some friends coming over, and I need you to be there with me. I actually wouldn't have minded going, but I had to pretend I didn't. But before I could start protesting, Mike said, "I'll pick you up at 11. Whereupon I heard my phone buzz. Looks like I'm going to the spring fair. I met Mike Robinson the same day I met my ex-wife. By the end of junior high, I was working at Specialty 5 days a week from 3:30 to 6 o'clock, and sometimes Saturdays if they needed it. I bought a used Corolla with high mileage, but it ran well and gave good gas mileage. The earnings were enough for insurance, gas, and left about $10 a week to help my mom. I was glad to start working full-time from 7 to 3:30 every day when school ended for the summer. The Tuesday after Memorial Day, I showed up early in the morning to start my first full day of work. The shop supervisor was a wiry man named Don Smith. It was Don who was my supervisor during my time working after school. Smitty ran all the machines in the shop, kept track of inventory, and supervised the shipping and receiving of materials to the shop. He basically ran the entire operation. He taught me a lot, and this summer I was going to learn more about how the milling, plywood, and other machines worked. My job was basically to maintain the machines. Everything I knew, I learned from Smitty. That Tuesday, I was told I had a 15-minute break at 10 a.m., 30 minutes for lunch at noon, and then a day off at 3:30. Smitty sent me at 10 a.m. to a break room I had never been in before. It was on the far side of the office, next to the women's restroom. When I walked into the office, I saw this cute little punk smirking, probably because of the way I was dressed. "Hey, Smitty, you're going to cause an energy crisis." I was wearing an old pair of coveralls Smitty had given me, and I still had his oval name tag sewn to my bib. It was smeared with oil from my work with the equipment. But that wasn't the worst of it. Immediately I heard giggling and saw a girl, about my age, pretty, giggling at me, covering herself with her hands. Who were these people? I had never seen them before at the Specialty. At that moment, the owner, a tall man who had looked at me the day of my interview, yelled at them to stop. I quickly headed to the break room, away from these two smug guys. As I sat there, embarrassed, drinking a cup and a copy, the owner, the tall man, walked into the break room. In all the months I'd worked there, I'd never spoken to him once. "Don't mind them, they're just my spoiled kids. They're working here this summer. But honestly, I'm not sure what Mike is being paid for. We've never officially met. I'm Ted Robinson." He held out his hand to me. "Cameron Joseph," I muttered as we shook hands. "Nice to meet you, Cameron. I've heard good things about you from Smitty. Let's talk again this summer. In the meantime, ignore those two assholes." That was my first meeting with Mike and Kimberly Robinson. That Saturday morning, I heard the horn of Mike's black BMW honking, only 20 minutes late. "Where's Meg?" I glanced over at Mike. Dark sunglasses, slicked back black hair, tanned face. Still the same handsome guy I'd met 12 years ago. "She's meeting Brandy and Celia for coffee downtown, and we're meeting them at the fair." Brandy and Celia? I wonder if this is a setup. We parked and walked a few blocks to the fairgrounds. "I have to drop this off at the fairgrounds, at the office." RA is one of the sponsors of the event, and Mike was delivering his company's brochures. The girls are standing at the booths. When we walked up, I saw a gorgeous blonde and smiling Megan, who kissed Mike and introduced me to Brandy and Celia. Brandy had long, dark, straight hair and was very shapely, but with a slightly stiff look. She was showing a little cleavage, and I had to keep my eyes open as we shook hands. Celia was completely different. Dark curly hair, athletic build, and a smile. She looked intently into my eyes. "Nice to meet you, Cameron. I've heard about you." I cast a glance at Megan and saw only a sly smile. My weekend was definitely getting better. In a group of 5, we wandered around the fairgrounds, and I often found myself sitting next to Celia. She had a good way of looking me straight in the eye when we talked. She had a wonderful laugh, and I felt sociable and witty. And every now and then I would glance over at Mike and notice him smiling at me. It was a wonderful day. We spent several hours looking at all the exhibits, occasionally running into people we knew and having a good time. Mike knew a lot of people, and it was good for his business. We decided to go to Mallory's and have a beer and try to get a table outside. Brandy decided to head home, something about a headache, and Mike said we'd take care of giving Celia a ride. We found a great outdoor table, and the sun was shining just fine. Mike told a lot of funny stories about work, marriage, and his family. I tried to remember the last time I had such a good time. Celia was fun to talk to, interesting, and asked me questions about myself. After Mike ordered his third drink, I casually remarked, "I definitely need to run tomorrow." Celia asked where I was running, and before I knew it, we had arranged to meet on Sunday at 9 a.m. We ended up going. I had such a good time with Celia, talking, laughing, learning about her life. It was really nice. We just seemed to fit together, and I hoped there wasn't some version of a significant other in her life. We dropped her off at her apartment, and I told her I'd pick her up at 9 to go for a run on the rhododendron trail. As soon as we headed home, I felt a look from the front seat. "What?" I said as they smirked. "Okay, she's fine. What do you want me to do?" "I'll run with her tomorrow." "Wow, that was fast," Mike grinned. Ever since Kim and I divorced, Mike has been trying to find me a new woman. I think he feels a little responsible for my failed marriage to my sister. He probably knew about her orientation beforehand, but never talked about it. I worked at special teamers my entire senior year out of high school as soon as soccer was over. I even worked Saturdays in the fall. I learned everything about equipment from the inside from Smitty. On busy weeks, I was asked to work on the equipment on Saturdays, and I ran everything but the veneer press and learned the capabilities of all the machines. Kim would come in on Saturdays and help with the books. She went to a private school on the other side of town, so that was the only time I could see her. She was very sweet, fun to hang out with, and she wasn't arrogant like the other rich kids. About halfway through senior year of high school, we started dating. What started out as friendship turned into dating. We were both working at Specialty that summer. I wasn't sure what I would be doing in the fall, but Kim was going to Colorado College. I was worried about the separation, about missing her, about other guys. I didn't know back then that other guys would never be an issue, and just the distance. When I told her all of this, she would reply, "Don't worry, you're the only man for me." She was being honest. She just didn't mention other women in the equation. At the end of that summer, my boss, Kim's father, Ted Robinson, came up to me and asked me about my future plans. I really didn't know what the future held. I had an application for Lane Community College on my dresser, but even though community college was inexpensive, I didn't have the money for it. It turned out that Mr. Hanreddy had cancer. He only came in a few days a week, and it wasn't long. "Cameron, you know our store? You're good with customers, and I need young people in this office. I've thought about having you work with Smitty when needed in the store, but mostly I want you in the office learning the business side of specialty timbers." I was shocked. "I'm going to start at $3,000 a month, and when times are good, there will be a bonus at the end of the year." I immediately agreed, and couldn't help but wonder if my relationship with his daughter had helped me get the position. On Monday, I started work in the office. I showed up in my store clothes, and Ted immediately sent me home to change. I began to learn the business. I was impressed with Ted's knowledge and his easy but confident manner with customers. I had a good knowledge of the products and our processing capabilities. What I didn't know was pricing, customer knowledge, and the accounting side of the business. Ted was helpful and patient with me. After the initial nervousness, I began to feel much more comfortable with him. I kept in touch with Kim while she was in college and felt our relationship remained strong through the fall. Sunday morning, I picked up Celia at 9 o'clock to go for a run. She looked amazing. We chatted casually as we drove to the trailhead. "I usually do a 5-mile loop, do you mind?" She agreed. We warmed up and hit the road. When running with someone for the first time, you have to adjust to their pace by speeding up or slowing down slightly, but we didn't need to. We synchronized right away. We chatted as we walked, and I learned that she was a dental hygienist, originally from the Bay Area. Her father was deceased. He worked for the railroad, and her mother worked at a hair salon owned by her mother's sister. Her mom was of Italian descent. Her mother's maiden name was Anna Maria Saltilli. That's where she got her curly dark hair from. Chatting the whole way, we did a 5-mile loop and got back to the car at 10:30. It felt so good, I could have run another 5 with her. I suggested coffee and we headed to a nearby coffee shop. On the way home, I heard from Mike and Megan that they didn't have any boyfriends or lovers they knew. I mentally checked. 1. No boyfriend. 2. She's fun to be with, and she seems to like me. 3. She looks great. I began to think that my bad luck may have changed. Unfortunately, I knew I still had a lot of work to do at home. The tile on the fireplace was half done, and the board for the shower was in the garage. Celia, I'm having a wonderful time with you, but I have to go. I'd like to see you next weekend. Are you free? Yeah, I guess so. How about we do something on Saturday? We exchanged phone numbers and then headed home. I thought about kissing her or hugging her or something. I just felt so close to her, but decided I would do the right thing and not rush things. I was very happy when I got home and got to work. At the beginning of the week, I discussed when the best time to schedule a weekend away was. I texted her on Monday after work and asked if she wanted to go hiking to Rainbow Falls during the day and have dinner afterward. She responded enthusiastically and added a heart emoji. Our first official date. Tuesday was a busy day at Specialty Timbers. Ted was in Seattle working with a major potential client. One problem after another surfaced, and I was the one who had to fix it. A late shipment, a disgruntled customer, and one of the milling machines went out while Smitty was working on a plywood machine. I didn't get home until after 7. I was exhausted. While I was defrosting a frozen pizza, my phone buzzed, announcing a text message had arrived. What now? I thought. To my utter delight, it was a message from Celia. My mood immediately changed, and we ended up texting for over an hour. It all felt so easy and natural. I know it had been less than a week, but I was excited about a woman for the first time in a long, long time. Wednesday night, I texted her, and we had another nice back-and-forth session. Thursday night, she initiated, and we discussed some of the details of our Saturday night plan. That evening, I called Mike, caught him as he and Megan were eating dinner, and he said he'd call back. They called back on the way home. Hey, what's up, Romeo? I heard Megan giggle. Just checking on how dinner went. I tried to turn the conversation to Celia, but I didn't want to sound too cocky in Megan's presence. Oh, shit. You don't care about our dinner, but we know you're going out with Celia this weekend. Your date must have gone well. I told them that running was good and that she seemed like a nice girl. Have you gotten her into bed yet? Mike asked. Don't be a jerk. Not everyone thinks the way you do, Megan said with a laugh. We chatted some more, joking and having fun, and it was time to leave. Dude, I haven't heard you this excited about a woman since my sister. I explained that I liked her so far. As we were hanging up, I heard Megan say, Just be careful, Cam. I wonder what she meant by that. Friday after work, I had just finished my run and was sitting on my back porch drinking a beer. What a difference a week has made. Last week at this point, I wasn't feeling well, but today I was feeling pretty good. Around 8, I sent Celia a text message, clarifying a few details about our date tomorrow, and just to see what she was up to. I checked my phone at 9:30, and there was no answer, which was a little unusual. Oh well, I'll see you tomorrow. I picked her up at 1 p.m. and we headed east, up the mountain to the trailhead. Something seemed off. She was still sweet, relatively affectionate, but without her usual energy. When I asked how she was feeling, she said, Just a little tired. It's been a long week. Before I could learn more about the long week, she started asking about the hike. No more explanations about the long week. We enjoyed the hike, and when the trail got wide enough, we walked side by side, and she held my hand. That little closeness was so nice after being away for so long. We planned to drop her off at home so she could change and get cleaned up, and be back by 7 o'clock for dinner at Mazzoletto's downtown. She looked great in her tight jeans and tight top. She gave me a big hug and kiss when I arrived. I was already thinking that if I pushed on, we'd be in her bed pretty quickly. But I remembered I was going to play it differently. The restaurant was cozy, great food, and delicious wines. We shared a bottle of wine and had a glass of brandy each while enjoying dessert. I knew I needed to sober up a bit before heading home, so I suggested we take a walk around the square. This is an area in the center of town, close to cars, where there are cafes, stores, bars, and other restaurants. It was a pleasant night, and Celia snuggled up to me as we walked. I think we both felt good, a little tipsy but happy. We talked easily and casually as we walked past couples and groups of people. As we were walking back, I noticed a group of young men up ahead, and as we passed them at an angle, one of them suddenly shouted, "Cece!" I was immediately wary, but Celia moved towards them, smiling, and accepted hugs from the three guys. "Hey girl, what's going on? What are you doing here?" And meanwhile, I'm standing there not noticing them all hugging. After probably a minute, though it seemed much longer to me, Celia turns to me, flushed, and says, "Cameron, these are my friends, Bobby, JT, and Marcus." I automatically extend my hand for a handshake. All three of them look at each other, smile, and diligently try to shake my hand with all sorts of wiggles. They chatted for about 10 minutes about something I didn't understand. From what I understood, it was about music and a club I'd heard about called Evolution. There was a sense of familiarity between Celia and these guys. I noticed an intimacy, especially with the one named Marcus, that was curious to the point of anxiety. I felt all the warmth and friendliness of the evening go away. From my observations, she seemed to enjoy the attention and company of this group. Finally, after hugging and kissing them as they parted, I said, "Nice to meet you." Marcus only nodded, and they turned and walked the other way. About 15 seconds later, I heard their gushing laughter. Celia snuggled up to me again, but her previous relaxed mood was gone. Did she really have friends like that? There was nothing wrong with them, but they weren't my type. She told me a little about them, and I realized that Evolution was a dance club in the old part of town that used to be an old warehouse. She told me how fun it was there and that we should go. I giggled and said I wasn't a very good dancer. No one cares. It's just a place to have fun. We drove home and I tried to be chipper, but something about the whole scene kept me from being as affectionate as I had been before that evening. When we got to her house, I walked her down the hall and gave her a hug. "Would you like to come upstairs for coffee?" Normally, this would be a no-brainer, but a combination of wanting to do the right thing and at the same time keep myself from getting hurt stopped me. "Thanks, but I'm fine. I'll see you later." I gave her a quick hug, kissed her cheek, and left. Throughout Kimberly's first and second year at Colorado College, we remained close. We saw each other at all of her holiday parties. I looked forward to her visits, and so did she. Almost as much as I did. When I asked her about school, she had little to say. Sometimes I would get jealous and ask her about all the guys at school. Finally, one day, maybe I got a little cocky, she grabbed me by my shirt and with the most serious look I had ever seen on her face said, "I told you there are no other guys, leave it alone," and walked out of the restaurant. For the most part, we got along just fine. I envisioned the perfect situation, me with Kimberly and her and I running specialty timbers. It was too good to be true, but it seemed like it could happen. I learned a lot from Kimberly's dad, Ted. He and I had a good and comfortable relationship. I think he was also happy with my relationship with Kim and me. I think he saw me as sort of the opposite of Mike. Mike was bright, arrogant, and fun. He went to UCLA and could barely keep up, partying his ass off at college parties. I think he and Ted had a conversation about coming to Jesus and eventually graduated from college. On the other hand, I wasn't flashy. But I made up for my lack of flashiness with hard work and knowledge of woodworking. Ted knew that Mike would never have a career at specialty timbers. QA, on the other hand, was looking forward to a long-term job and a serious relationship with his daughter, and Ted was definitely on my side in all of this. Here's what happened. I proposed to Kimberly before her junior year, and she said she needed to think about it. In the middle of that year, Kim asked to hang out for a while. I was heartbroken. I had gone head over heels in my work. We still socialized, and our friendship was strong, but Kim was struggling to find herself. Throughout junior year, we hardly saw each other. We emailed, called each other, and sometimes I would see her when she came home. We worked together all that summer, but I gave her the freedom she asked for. Throughout my senior year, our communication went downhill. I even went on a few dates, nothing serious. All of a sudden, she started calling and emailing like she used to. I need space. That summer, she came back, we started dating again, and she asked me if I could still propose to her. I was shocked, but happily said yes. We got married that Christmas. I was very happy, Ted was very happy, and looking back, I would call Kimberly medium happy. But in that moment, I was blinded by my dreams of the girlfriend, career, and father I never had. For a while, life was great for me. Kimberly and I worked together at Specialty Timbers. Things were going well. I was learning a lot. My relationship with Ted was very good and continued to improve. Surprisingly, my relationship with my new son-in-law Mike improved as well. I realized that even though he was a narcissistic, arrogant jerk at times, he was fiercely loyal, and for some reason he liked me. For the first 2 years I thought everything was great, but cracks started to appear in the foundation, and the first big crack was our sex life. By the beginning of the 3rd year, we were doing it once or twice a month. In hindsight, I can say that she just didn't like it. Then Millie moved here. She was a friend of Kimberly's from Colorado. Her name is Ming Lee Pham. Her name was Millie. And through Ted's connections, I bought the house I still live in on the cheap for $125,000. It needed a lot of work, and the bank wouldn't even give me a loan against it. I bought it on contract from Ted's old partner, and the actual payment was made through Specialty and deducted from my check, which was incomprehensible, but Mike assured me that was the best way to do the deal. I made it habitable and Kim never complained. In the back was a small guest house with running water and electricity. Millie moved in there. She was an artist, and the cottage became her studio. It seemed to Kim that she spent more time in the cottage than in the house. Millie was always nice to me, and there was no tension between us. After 6 months, Kim came to me one day with tears in her eyes and told me she was in love with Millie. I thought she was joking, but she wasn't. There was no swearing or fighting. I saw black and cried. Cried for the first time in almost 20 years. The loss was intense and so sad. I realized that I had tied my relationship with Kim to my relationship with her family and work. My whole life had to change. For 3 days, I sat at home and did nothing. The darkest thoughts settled in my brain. I was on the verge of seriously ending my life, and then Mike showed up. He spoke, and then we talked, and then he listened to me. He made a phone call, and within 30 minutes, Ted was on site. Ted assured me that no matter what happened, I had a home at Specialty. Mike told my dad that I needed a week's vacation, and Ted agreed. Mike took me along for the ride where we talked, drank, I cried a little and reflected. On the way back, I began to realize some things. I was in terrible pain, but I had a job I loved. I had a boss and former father-in-law whom I genuinely loved and respected. And finally, I had a good and loyal friend in the person of Mike. Even Kim and I found common ground. The divorce went easily. She didn't want anything, and I kept my house. The most amazing thing was how sweet and supportive Millie was. There were hard times, but I had a good support system of people who seemed to genuinely care about me. I promised myself that before getting close to a woman again, I would protect myself first. On the way home after dropping Celia off, I tried to come to terms with my thoughts. There was nothing special about meeting those guys. I felt a little disrespected by them and a little disrespected by Celia. Then again, it was only our second date. She was entitled to have friends. But there was something about this encounter that spoke to me of intimacy with these guys. It didn't fit the image of Celia that I had envisioned. Maybe I should back off a little. The next day was Sunday, and I needed to finish work on the fireplace and eliminate the dry rot. After breakfast, I plugged in my podcasts and immersed myself in the work. Being able to repair and remodel this house the way I wanted was satisfying. And owning my own home and making it as good as I know it will be was especially satisfying. In the middle of the afternoon, I checked my phone. 2 messages. One from Mike, checking in to see how things were going, and one from Celia. Brandy and I are enjoying the weather and drinking coffee. Thanks for last night. I needed to think about that. Was I being overly sensitive, or should I have trusted my instincts? I need to think about it some more. Later that afternoon, I sent a non-committal reply message. Have a good time. And that was the end of it. Monday evening, I received another message from her. How was your day? I waited a few hours and replied, good, and yours? I got a long message about work and a funny story about a dental patient. I didn't respond. Tuesday night, there was nothing, and I calmed down a bit. Wednesday night, she called. I was polite, but without much enthusiasm. Finally, she asked what was wrong. I didn't say anything, and then she asked if I was upset with her. I replied that I wasn't. I was just busy. She invited me to dinner Saturday night. I accepted. Perhaps I was too petty to get upset about something like that. I vowed to put it behind me and see what happens next. Dinner on Saturday was nice. She's a good cook, and her apartment was beautifully decorated. I was starting to feel comfortable again and was full of optimism. After dinner, we ended up in her bed. It was amazing. We spent Sunday together, and the intimacy furthered our relationship. We went for a run, and this time we showered at my house. I showed her my reclamation project, and she seemed interested in all the work I was doing. I showed her an old redwood hot tub that I had taken from a project we were providing materials for, and showed her where I was going to put it in the backyard. Celia was impressed with my carpentry skills, and she seemed to like my house. Over the next few weeks, we saw each other 3 times a week and chatted or texted daily. In one of my weaker moments, I agreed to go to Evolution with her on a Friday night. I can dance a little bit and I don't mind it, but I had a feeling it wasn't my scene. Celia was so excited that I couldn't help but give in to her enthusiasm. Evolution was a trendy new club in the warehouse district of Old Town. I had heard of it, but had never been there. I told myself that in a strong relationship, you have to make sacrifices from time to time, and this seemed to be one of them. We got there a little before 9 o'clock. Celia seemed to know a lot of people there, staff and other customers. The room was dark, strobe lights were on, and there were a couple of DJs standing on risers. The dance floor was a mass of bodies moving to the music, and it was hot inside. We found a seat, and Brandy and some guy approached us amidst hugs and laughter. It was hard to talk in the noise. Celia took my hand and we headed to the dance floor. She was good, and I was out of place. Pretty soon, we were in the thick of the crowd. After a while, I wasn't sure who was dancing with Celia anymore, me or someone else. I watched her and could tell she was having a great time. After a while, I called out to her that I was going to get a beer, but she only nodded and smiled. I waited to see if she would come with me, but she was engrossed in the dance. I stood by the table and occasionally saw flashes of Celia. So far, I didn't recognize anyone from the group we'd run into downtown a few weeks ago. Celia came back and had a drink, but I realized she wanted to keep dancing, so we walked back. I was actually having a good time until I got to know a couple of the guys we met downtown, and in particular Marcus. Marcus was a great dancer and maneuvered us so that we were actually dancing with Celia. I tried to move in and got elbowed. Maybe it was unintentional, but I doubt it. It went on like this for a while, and finally I shouted in her ear that I would get her a drink, and if she wanted one, she only nodded and continued dancing. I reached the bar and walked back to our table. I looked at the clock. It was a little after 11. I definitely wanted to get out of there, and I kept waiting for Celia to come back and bring my drink. Finally, she came back, laughing and smiling, with Marcus on her heels. She kissed my sweaty cheek and took her drink. She took a sip, and then Marcus grabbed it and drank the rest. Celia only laughed. "Let's dance," she grabbed my hand. "No thanks. I think I've had enough," I said. "One more?" she asked. Just then Marcus intervened. "Come on, girl, I'll dance with you," and they left. I was furious, but it got worse. While I stood and watched, they had a shag on the dance floor. His hands were completely on her, and she looked like she was enjoying it. Now I was getting really pissed off. I looked at my watch. It was past midnight. I was done. I was going to give her until 12:30 and then leave. I think it was 12:28 when she came back. I grabbed her and we headed for the door. I was angry, but I tried to act calm. I wasn't going to yell and scream. All the way home, she talked about what a good time she had, how great the music was, and how much she enjoyed dancing. The fact that I hadn't said 2 words didn't seem to bother her. When we got to her apartment, she realized where we were. "I thought we were staying at your place tonight." "I'm fine," I said. "How about another night?" I said this with a forced smile. "Okay," she said, and looked at me. I smiled, kissed her, and left. No doubt this was not how our dates had ended over the past few weeks. The next day, we had no correspondence. I was struggling with my feelings. I really liked her and cared about her, but that scene and her enjoyment of it bothered me. And with this Marcus guy, they seemed more than just friends. I was busy both Saturday and Sunday, mostly trying to adjust the mahogany hot tub to its place on the deck. Sunday night, I saw that I had gotten a "How are you?" text from her. I didn't reply. Monday night, I got another message from her. "Hi, I miss talking to you. Give me a call." I figured I should reply to it, so I texted back, "Sorry, I have a lot to do. Let's meet tomorrow." "Okay," she replied. Tuesday night, I was still struggling with the situation and didn't respond. And on Wednesday, I got home from work around 6, and there was her black Volkswagen in front of my house. Oh, time to face it. I found her sitting on my back porch. "What's the matter? Are you leaving me?" She looked a little angry. "Look, Celia, I don't know what's going on. I'm struggling with some things right now." "What?" she asked. And that's when I started to tell her. I started with my marriage to Kim and how hurt I was, and then I confessed my jealousy of her friendship with Marcus and how I felt disrespected at the nightclub. I laid it all out for her. Why not, since I might never see her again? She sat there looking at me, and then tears started rolling down her cheeks. "I'm so sorry. I didn't mean to hurt you, but if it means you stay with me, I'll never go to that place again. I want you. I miss you. And I think I might be falling in love with you." I was shocked. I thought this was the end for us, but we just turned left and went in a different direction. Love? She promised again that she didn't need to hang out with that crowd or go to dance clubs. I asked her if she was sure, and she said sure. If I had known it bothered you, I never would have asked you there. We celebrated that night in my bed. The next few months went great. We did a lot of things. Went on vacation for a week to Hawaii. It was my first time there, and we loved it. We socialized with my friends and a few of her friends, but never with Marcus and that crowd. I never mentioned his name. We had been dating for about 8 months now, and the holidays were approaching. I had her almost every night, and we started discussing the possibility of living together. We spent the holidays with my family and the Robinsons. She got along great with everyone except Millie. For some reason, there was some distance between them. After the first year, business picked up. We were selling products in Northern California and Puget Sound, and with the construction boom, our goods were in high demand. Ted asked if he and I could get together Thursday night. "Sure," I replied. "What's up?" "We'll talk Thursday," was all he said. Thursday was busy, and before I knew it, it was 5 o'clock. We met in Ted's office. I was a little nervous about the formality of this meeting. Ted explained that he would be turning 60 this year and was doing some long-range planning. "In lieu of a bonus this year, I will give you 9% of specialty timbers." I was shocked. "It's not what I expected," he continued. "We opened NorCal and Western Washington, and that was successful, as you know. but now we're getting a lot of demand in Colorado and some resort areas in the Rocky Mountains. I want you to open up those markets. That will require a little traveling, maybe a week a month. Would you agree? Absolutely. I've seen so little of the country that traveling to these areas was exciting. And being a co-owner was really great. I was so happy. He told me that he now owned 51%, Mike and Kim each owned 20%, and I owned the remaining 9%. Kim was the CFO, and Mike ran the entire financial part of the business. I asked Ted if Kim and Mike were okay with me becoming a co-owner. It was their idea, he replied. And there's one more thing. Smitty is retiring at the end of the year. Millie's brother, John Pham, is going to start working at the store with Smitty. I want you to keep an eye on him, too. I will, I said. I couldn't wait to tell Celia that I was now the owner, that I would start traveling. I was on cloud 9. She was happy about being an owner, but was much less excited about my traveling. How long will you be gone? I explained that it would usually be a few days once a month. That seemed to make her relax a bit. I got right to work, and within 2 weeks I was in Denver. I think my straightforward knowledge of the products and process helped, and we started getting orders right away while I was still getting started. When I received my direct deposit for March, I saw that I had another $1,500 gross in my account. I checked with Kim and she said, "That's your commission." We pay 3% of the total commission. Didn't he tell you that? I did a little math and figured I could easily sell $500,000 in the first year. That's an extra $15,000 a year on top of my regular salary. This year, my income was going to approach 6 figures. We planned another trip to Hawaii for September, and I began to think about proposing to Celia. After the previous problems, everything was going smoothly. I was very happy at work, and with the extra income from commissions, I was able to speed up work on the house. The house was on a large lot, was single level, with a guest house in the backyard. The house had 3 bedrooms, 3 bathrooms, an open kitchen, an office, and a family room adjacent to the kitchen, while the cottage had 1 room with a bath and a small kitchen. I spent a lot of time in the garden. The garden had been my oasis, and now, with the mahogany hot tub, it was like a spa. Celia vacated her apartment in May and officially moved in. It was wonderful to have her here, and for the most part, everything was fine. There was some tension when I was traveling, but I figured we'd get used to it. In August, I invited Mike over for dinner. I had some serious things to discuss with him. We met at a bar near his office at 6 p.m. The weather was warm and we sat outside. "What's up, bro?" "I've decided I'm going to propose to Celia, and I'd like you to be the best man." He just stared at me for probably a full minute. "Getting married again? You remember what happened last time?" "This is different. I'm different. I was just a kid then. Neither Kim nor I knew what we were doing then. This is now. I love her, and I don't want to be alone." "You're sure of her? I recall a few punches not too long ago," he said. We talked about it some more, and I had nervous thoughts based on his words, like he was trying to talk me out of it. I respected Mike's opinion, but he didn't know Celia like I did. "I want you to be my best man." I told him I was going to propose when we were in Kauai. We celebrated with a shot of tequila and ended up having a great night. 2 weeks later, I made another trip to Denver. I needed samples to show to customers, so I went to the store on Friday when Smitty wasn't around. I grabbed my stuff and went to the saw. "What do you need, boss?" It was John Pham. "I got it, John, thanks." He quickly came over, took my samples, cut them apart, boxed them up, and handed them back to me. "If you need anything else, I'll take care of it." Quite an impressive young man. "Thanks, John, I appreciate it." "Boss, if you need any more help, my cousin is a good worker." "That's good to hear, John, and you can call me Cam." "Okay, boss. On my last trip to Colorado, I had made some inquiries about a place called Longfellow's, but this time I had an appointment with Junior Longfellow for Monday at 11 o'clock. I met him at their office outside of Denver. He was a guy about my age with a blonde beard and hair gathered into a ponytail. We found common ground, and our meeting stretched into the afternoon. Not only did they seem like good customers, I liked Junior. As we parted ways, he told me that he would be doing some West Coast tours in November and wanted to see our production. These are usually great networking opportunities. I told him I had business in Montana for 1 week in November, but I would get in touch with him. The trip to Kauai was incredible. We stayed at the best resort, and the commission helped cover those expenses. We spent time by the pool and on the beach. We explored the island, hiked, snorkeled, and kayaked, active yet relaxed. The penultimate night we sat on the balcony watching the sunset, I gave her an engagement ring and asked her to marry me. She cried, hugged me, and we were back in bed. As we lay there, I asked her if she was happy, and she said she was. If you could change anything in our lives, what would it be? I asked. Nothing, she replied. And we were quiet for a minute, and then she said, I guess if anything, I wish you wouldn't travel so much. I told her that I needed to tone it down, that it was important for our financial future, and that there might be times when she could travel with me. Okay, she said quietly, and I quickly brushed that remark off without thinking. Perhaps a little too quickly. Our lives continued to move on, but now also with wedding preparations. We decided to do it on Valentine's Day. Celia was doing most of the planning, and I was supporting her. Things got busy at work. The addition of the Rocky Mountain Market increased demand, and we ended up hiring John's cousin, Nathan Nguyen, and another friend of theirs, Van. Knowing that Smitty was leaving, I made an effort to spend time with John. I saw that he was smart, hardworking, and dedicated. One night he invited me to have a beer with him, Nathan and Van. They were all nice guys, they seemed to like me, and they were committed to specialty. We had a lot of things going on in our lives, and they were all good. I decided to hire a contractor to remodel my kitchen. It was a guy I knew who was buying a house from us. I could have done it myself, but it would have taken months, and I didn't want to ruin this important part of the house for a long time. Celia was involved in the design process, and while we didn't agree on everything, her input was helpful. At the end of October, I had to hit the road again. Celia was not happy about this and started pressuring me to make the trip too, 3 days rather than 5 days. There was no way I could fit in less than 5. My November trip coincided with the week Junior was going to be in town for a mill tour. I would have missed that event, but Ted said he would be happy to show him our work. I had a trade show with a Montana customer, and this gave me a good opportunity to showcase our products to that market. The trade show started Friday morning, then in the evening and all day Saturday. Sunday morning I had an early flight out of Billings. The expo was crowded on Friday, there was a cocktail party at 8 p.m., and I had several promising conversations. Every night I traveled, I also called Celia in the evening to see how things were going. This Friday I got to my room a little before 10 and called. No answer. Maybe she had gone to bed or was in the shower. I called again at 10:30, again no answer, so I figured she was asleep. The show started Saturday at 10. I slept until 7, got up, worked out in the crappy little hotel gym, and called Celia around 8:15. Still no answer. Taking a quick shower, I saw that I had missed her call and called her back. Hi, we miss each other all the time. How are you? She answered normally and seemed a little out of sorts, not with the enthusiasm I was expecting. Called you a couple times? Did you go to bed early? No, my phone was off. I was just fiddling with work in the kitchen, she replied. Did they finish laying the tile? And we went on to talk about the kitchen renovation, completely oblivious to the fact that she hadn't picked up the phone the night before. Thanksgiving was coming up on Monday, and we were going to celebrate with the Robinsons. All week, Celia had been a little out of sorts. Quiet, a little withdrawn, perhaps the holidays had stressed her out. I didn't say anything about her mood. I received an invitation from the Longfellows, our new client in Denver, to attend their Christmas party on December 9th. It was a Thursday night. We talked about Celia going with me, but I had other things to do and she had work to do, so I went alone. They had decorated their warehouse for the holidays. I knew there would be drinks there, so I called from my hotel. It was fun, and later that night I was talking to Junior about our trip to Hawaii. I was showing him pictures and he saw one with Celia. "Let me see it again. Is that your fiancée?" I replied. "Yes, that's her," I said proudly. He handed the phone back to me, then took it again and looked at it intently. He had a serious look on his face. "What's the matter?" I asked. "Does she know someone named Brandy?" he asked. I looked at him and said, "Yeah, why?" "I could be wrong, but I thought I saw her and some chick named Brandy at a dance club last month when I was in your town, and I have to tell you as a friend, they didn't act like they were engaged." That was when I was in Montana. I began to get angry and embarrassed. I asked him to tell me what he knew. Friday night after the mill tour, I went with another guy to a dance club called Dust. It was just as you would expect. Loud, dark, etc. At one point, Sean, who I was with, was dancing with this Brandy. He said he could take her back to the hotel if he wanted, but later she and your woman were with other guys. I don't remember all their names, but they looked like trouble. "Do you remember someone named Marcus?" I asked. "Yeah, that was one of them. He was friends with your woman," Junior said. "Look, you're my friend, I like you, Cam, and as much as it pains me, I'd like someone to tell me if something like that happened to me." "I know," I said. "I appreciate that, but I should probably go. Thanks for the party and the information." I gave Junior a big hug and left. I was worked up, but I had these things to think about. #1. She told me no more dance clubs. That pissed me off, and #2. What was this relationship with Marcus? She lied to me. I just didn't know how badly. I barely slept that night and my flight home was delayed. Celia texted me several times, but I never responded. Finally, as I was boarding the plane, she called and I answered. "When will you be home?" "My flight is delayed and I won't be home until 6 p.m. at the earliest." "That's too bad. I love you and miss you," she said. I said, "See you tonight," and hung up. After landing and on the way home, I decided my plan was to see if she would lie to me. I hugged her and kissed her when I got home. I checked on the progress in the kitchen. "I have a question for you," I said. "Sure, honey. What is it?" "When I was stuck in Montana for the trade show last month, what were you doing Friday night?" She turned away and replied, "Nothing. Just hanging out here?" "You have one last chance to think about that answer. Where were you?" I asked her calmly but coldly. "I was..." Whereupon she burst into tears and ran off to the bedroom. I sat and waited. I was angry and sad. I just waited. 2 hours later, she came out and told me the story. She had talked to Brandy the day before, and Brandy said they should check out a new club called Dust. Brandy knew I was out of town and said they were just going to check it out. They ended up staying there late and dancing late into the night. "And then what happened?" I asked. "Then I went home." "Alone?" I replied. "Alone, of course." "And Brandy was with you?" "No, she slept with her old boyfriend." "So you came home alone?" "Yes," she said. "Who was at the club that I might know?" "Not really, I don't know." You can imagine how the rest of the conversation went. It was like pulling teeth to get reliable information out of her. Eventually, I found out that they went to a club, met up with some friends, and did some dancing. Marcus and his company showed up later and they hung out with them for a bit. She claims she left around midnight. "Did you ever have a thing with Marcus?" I asked. "Absolutely not," she replied. "Does he want to have fun with you?" I asked. "No, well, maybe, but he's just a friend and you're the only one I want to be with," she wailed. I told her I needed to think about it and she should stay at the cottage. Sobbing, she gathered her things and headed for the cottage. The timing was most unfortunate. We were getting ready to get married. The holidays were just around the corner and my whole future was hanging in the air. I needed advice, so I called Mike. He suggested I come over Friday night. Meanwhile, this week with Celia had been very uncomfortable. She was either crying or apologizing. I was frustrated. I loved her, but I didn't trust her at the moment. And can there be love without trust? I met up with Mike and Megan at their swanky new home in the South Hills. I told them the whole story and asked them what they thought about it. Mike was of the opinion that if you can't trust someone, you shouldn't marry them. It's hard to argue with that. Megan put it this way: I feel a little responsible for introducing you two, and I don't know Celia that well, but I think she's a good person, not a bad person. And I also know that she's deeply in love with you. On that, I was in agreement with Megan. At the end of the day, you have to believe in them or not. Only you can decide that, she said. That night I came home and asked Celia to come over to our house. We made small talk for a few minutes, and I noticed that she was nervous. I had a few questions for her, and I told her she had to be completely honest. She agreed. I asked if she felt that the whole club scene was important to her. I asked what exactly happened that night she and Brandy went to Dust, and I asked her about the true nature of her relationship with Marcus. She told me that no, the clubs weren't important, that Brandy picked her up at her weakest moment. She was bored and lonely and just wanted to have fun. Yes, Marcus was hitting on her, but as it was, she wasn't interested in him. Yes, the attention from these guys made her feel good, but she never did anything other than get groped a few times on the dance floor. I thought about it, and what she said sounded sincere and in line with my impressions of her. I told her it was a good first step. She asked if she could stay the night in our bed, and I agreed. The holidays passed, though. The wedding and life went on. My radar was slightly elevated, and I watched her closely. But nothing made me think anything was wrong. Celia was loving and affectionate. For my January trip, she took a week's vacation and came with me, and we spent the weekend in snowy Boulder. We had a great time. The whole Dusty incident faded from memory. In February, we got married, and it was a wonderful event. I met her mom and several members of her family. The total was less than 100 people, family, the Robinsons, and a few close friends. None of her dance club buddies except Brandy. We honeymooned on the island of St. Martin in the Caribbean. It was different from Hawaii. The ocean was warmer, less waves, and a beautiful blue color. You could feel the strong European influence. Without a doubt, it was my best vacation ever. For the next 2 years, things went very well. Sometimes I thought back to that December and the fact that I almost canceled my wedding and marriage, but was glad I didn't. I put all doubts aside and thought only positive things. We continued to work on the house, and it was becoming a real jewel in the neighborhood. I was proud of it. Business continued to go well, and we even thought about opening other markets. But at the moment, with the people and our work, we were stretched to the limit. I developed a good friendship with John Pham. He was a great employee and a good guy. He knew our operations and our equipment. He was the last person to leave the store at night. Every few weeks, John, Van, Nathan, and I would sit in the shop after work, where it smelled like cedar and sawdust, and drink 6 bottles each. Our conversations were casual, about business and life. I enjoyed their company, and I think they liked me. Just when things seemed pretty stable, a new competitor from Asia started importing into the U.S. We first heard about them in Southern California, but we knew we would soon see them in our markets. It was an engineered product that looked close to some of our products, but cost at least 30% less. We started to notice that sales were dropping. We had been growing steadily, investing in resources to meet demand, and now, for the first time ever, sales were going backwards. Ted, Kimberly, and I met to discuss our strategy in the face of the new competition. Ted felt the best thing to do was to get out to our customers and talk about the differences in quality of our products. That will mean more trips, and I'm afraid I'll need you, Cam, to cover our NorCal market as well as the mountain market. I knew Ted was right, and I knew I needed to do it, but I was stressed. That night when I got home, I talked to Celia about the business and what I would need to do. "How long will it take?" she asked. I told her I didn't know, but it would definitely take months. "Months?" she exploded. "You mean you'll be gone 2 weeks a month for months?" I replied that I was, and I couldn't promise anything. She got angry. Now, not only was I stressed about work, but I was also not getting support from Celia. We had some good moments, but over the next 6 months, our relationship deteriorated. The closeness we had rarely ever occurred. I felt like I was fighting in the marketplace as well as at home. After 6 months of my traveling and her lack of understanding, our marriage was at rock bottom. I had to travel for business. The travel helped, the business was stable, but it required constant effort. She didn't understand. Monday, I left for the Bay Area. The weekend was rough. No intimacy, no good conversations. I started to feel guilty about the trip, called her on Tuesday and told her we needed to spend the night together when I got back. She seemed a little more energized, and I thought maybe our relationship would start to improve. Friday night, we went to Tomlinson's Bistro in Old Town. Celia was affectionate. The conversation was good. She even asked me about business. We had a great dinner, a bottle of wine, and a couple after-dinner drinks. I called an Uber, and we waited for the car outside the restaurant. I went to the restroom, and when I came back, there was Marcus, Bobby, and the whole crowd huddled around Celia. She was smiling and laughing, and Marcus had his arm around her waist. I walked over and grabbed his wrist to pull his hand away. He flinched as if to set my jaw, and I shoved him. The next instant, I was on the ground. One of them hit me with a cold weapon, and I lost consciousness for a second. When I came to my senses, Celia was helping Marcus up. Then she apologized to them. I was unconscious, but I realized what I was seeing. Then she came over to me and started yelling, blaming me for what happened. They left when someone from the restaurant came out to check what was going on. I was still on my knees with a swollen eye. At that moment, an Uber showed up. We both got in it. I was still in a daze and she just clung to me. Why did I have to ruin everything? Why did I knock Marcus down? What was I thinking grabbing his arm? This is my body. What were you doing attacking my friends? I didn't say a word. I didn't trust myself. I was so angry at her and the situation. I'm stressed at work, stressed about my marriage, and she's showing much more loyalty to Marcus than to her husband. As soon as we entered the house, she went into the kitchen to get me an ice pack. She had no idea how pissed off I was. "Get your ass away from me," I growled. This shocked her. She just stood there staring at me. "Get your ass out of here. You can stay at the cottage." "What's your problem tonight?" she replied. "Tonight," progressed I. "My problem is you every night. No support, no affection, just whining because I'm trying to make a living for us." She walked to the bedroom, grabbed her things, and without a word, headed out the back door to the cottage. I definitely needed the space, and I was relieved when she left. I sat down at the table and drank the brandy. By the second drink, I had calmed down and was busy analyzing my life. I loved my job, and even though it was difficult, it was a career. I loved my relationship with the Robinsons. Ted was a mentor and friend, Kim and I were always friends despite a failed marriage, and Mike was my best friend. I loved my home. I steadily molded it into my idea of the perfect home. Perhaps because growing up, my family was never sure of housing, having my own home was especially important. I was starting to feel better and decided that tomorrow Celia and I would talk and maybe even consider counseling. I gave her some time. At 9 a.m., I went out to the cottage with a tray with coffee, juice, and fruit on it. I opened the door, but no one was there. Her stuff wasn't here, and she obviously hadn't spent the night here. Okay, what to do now? I wandered around the backyard for about an hour and called her. Straight to voicemail. In the middle of the afternoon, I called again, voicemail again. I did some housework, tried it a few more times, and then called Kimberly. She invited me over for lunch, and she, Millie, and Kim and I discussed my situation. Kim said we had both made mistakes, but Millie was firmly on my side. We discussed all the options, including divorce. I was in town that week, and after another half-dozen calls and no response until Tuesday, the ball was in her hands. Friday mid-afternoon she called. She was visiting friends and wanted to stop by to pick up some of her stuff. She showed up at 6 o'clock in the evening. I wanted to talk, but she said it wasn't time yet. I asked where she was staying. She said at a friend's house. I asked who, and she said, just at a friend's house. See, I told her that I was leaving next week for a weekend at another show, and that I would like to talk to her when I got back. She nodded, saying okay. She drove off in some car I didn't recognize with dark tinted windows. I couldn't tell who was driving. See, I decided to fly out to Denver Sunday night so I could get straight to work Monday morning. I offered my clients the quality, service, and relationships we had established. Compared to lower prices, this was the only advantage my Asian competitor had. We actually kept a good percentage of our business, especially when material defects started showing up in the Asian product. Tuesday night, I had dinner with Junior Longfellow. He and I were close enough that I told him the whole story of my situation. You know, he said, we don't really need you at the show this weekend. We were co-sponsoring a booth at the expo with Longfellow. The expo is going to be slow, and for that matter, I already have too many people scheduled. I think you should go back and take care of business at home. My first reaction was to protest, but I decided to go along with it. Friday morning, I caught an early flight that got me home before 9 a.m. The rest of the week in Colorado went well. I was optimistic, even though I knew Celia and I had some work to do. I drove straight home from the airport, and upon opening the door, I immediately realized something was wrong. The house had been trashed. Had I really been robbed? When I looked closer, it looked like there had been a party. There were empty liquor bottles, trash, unwashed dishes everywhere. There was a burn mark on my refinished hardwood floor and a huge dark stain on the couch. I checked everything. No one was in the house, but it looked like the bed in the guest room had been used. Celia? Did she really do that? I thought she loved the house as much as I did. I walked outside. The backyard looked normal, but I saw a few cigarette butts on the ground. I walked over to the cottage, and when I opened the door, I saw Celia and Marcus sleeping on the bed. What the hell is going on? She jumped up. You weren't supposed to be home until tomorrow, she said. Meanwhile, Marcus carelessly rolled over and stared at me with a smirk on his face. Get out of here, you asshole! I barked at him. Chill out, man. I'll certainly leave, but you do realize that the lady here owns half of this house. You have 2 minutes to get the hell out of here, yelled I. We're married, and this is my house too, she replied. I was furious and knew that if I didn't get away from these two, something very bad was going to happen. 2 minutes, I said, and walked away. Back at the main house, I called Mike and explained what had happened. He was calm and said he would make some calls to divorce attorneys and get everything straightened out. Divorce seemed like the only way out at this point. I called Kim at work and briefly told her my side of the story, whereupon she said she and Millie would come over tonight. I ordered new door locks from the hardware store. I was so excited and set about cleaning up the goddamn mess in my house. Mike called back and had an appointment on Monday at 11 a.m. with the divorce attorney he was referred to. His name was Darren King. I checked his profile. Ex-military, originally from Texas. I found a picture of him. Dark hair, strong jaw, and a very non-serious look. Okay. Cell phone rings. I checked the cottage, but they were gone. It was a mess there, too. I got the locks and installed them. By then, it was getting close to dinner time, and Kim and Millie showed up. They got the whole story, and even Kim agreed. There was no way to save this relationship. At this point, I was more angry than saddened. I met with Darren King, and he was just as he appeared. A firm handshake, a look straight into his eyes. He explained that although she had committed adultery, it would not be a factor in the divorce decree. He asked about my assets, and I told him about the house, bank and retirement accounts, and a 9% stake in specialty timbers. He said that everything would likely be split 50-50, and we should prepare for that outcome. He said he would have all the paperwork ready, and I could hand it in by the end of the week. After I left, I was in shock. My marriage was over, she would get half the value of the house, and half of my equity in specialty timbers. The solidity of my entire life was in jeopardy. I began to get depressed. I called Mike to explain what was going on. After explaining what Darren King had told me about 50/50ths, Mike said, "Don't worry about it yet. Just take care of yourself and I may be able to help." After talking to Mike, I felt a little better. But what could Mike do? The law is the law. I went to work, mostly because I didn't want to be alone, and tried to immerse myself in the familiar business of helping run this business. It seems that both Ted and Kim had talked to Mike, and they were both enthusiastic about what the outcome might be. I, on the other hand, was not so optimistic. Even John, Nathan, and the guys from the warehouse were optimistic. John came up to me and said, "Boss, we've got your back, don't worry." I sincerely appreciated their friendship. On Friday, I served her with divorce papers at work. I immediately got a text from her saying, "Bastard, you should have sent them to me at work. I want half of everything." I called Mike, who had me call Darren, who told me to cut off all communication with her. If she hired a lawyer, I was to contact Darren, and then it would be decided between the lawyers. I couldn't help but worry about my house and my shares in specialty. I was upset and called Mike, he said. "I know you're worried, but I'm working on a few things for you. Have I ever let you down before?" No, but I asked him, "What exactly are you working on?" "I can't tell you yet. Trust me." As the weeks went by, my life became solely about work. I didn't even want to work on the house. She could have it. I was working with a dark cloud. Not only were my assets being encroached upon, but my wife was missing. I wondered the whole time what had happened. I knew I was away from home a lot, but I felt like she realized it was for our future. I realized that in life, you have to make short-term sacrifices for long-term gain. I knew she was a bit of a flirt and liked to get attention from men. That whole scene at the dance club showed that. I was sad, nervous, and angry all rolled into one. If there was good news, it was that business had recovered, and we were beginning to make plans to enter the Southern California and possibly Texas markets. We had inquiries for our products from those regions. Driving home one evening, I saw a car with dark-tinted windows, with Celia in it, pull up to the curb in front of my house and then pull away when I pulled up. They definitely knew where I lived. The following Tuesday, I received a call from Darren King informing me that he had correspondence with Celia's attorney. They were demanding half of my equity stake in specialty timbers, 50% of my bank account and investments, and the house. I exploded. No way in hell! He told me to calm down. They could demand whatever they wanted. He was working with Mike on something that had to do with my finances, and we might have a surprise for them. Another 2 weeks went by, and one evening John, Nathan, Van, and I went out for a beer in Old Town. As we sat at the Z-Bar, a couple of Marcus's guys walked past us and gave me a look. Then they hurriedly walked away. I looked back and John was just staring at them. "Is that the asshole's boss?" asked John, and I said, "Yeah." The three of them started talking in Vietnamese. "What?" asked me. "Don't worry, boss. We got your back." The next day, Darren called me and told me there was a preliminary and potential settlement conference at his office the following Wednesday. "What do I need to do? How can I help?" I asked. "Asked me." "Just be here at 3 p.m., he told me. I called Mike and told him what was going on. "Yeah, I know, we'll be there too." "We?" I asked. "Who are we?" "Like I told you, have faith. Maybe it'll all work out." And then he hung up. I was puzzled, but slightly encouraged. I was there early Wednesday morning, and Darren's secretary took me to a far office. A few minutes later, I was ushered into a conference room. On our side of the table sat Darren Mike, a man I didn't know, and me. On the other side sat Celia's lawyer, Rick Blasingame, Celia, still looking good, and I couldn't believe it, Marcus, sitting there smirking. There were no handshakes or small talk. Darren began, "Okay, Mr. Blasingame, this is your meeting. Go ahead." "If I may," he began, "Mrs. Joseph just wants what is rightfully owed to her after your client kicked her out of the matrimonial home." Go on, said Darren, looking directly at him. Here is a fair and accurate accounting of the marital property, and held out a paper to all of us. It read as follows. A. 9% of Specialty Timbers LLC, one half valued at $360,000. B. 50% of a residence on Ravenscrest Drive, one half valued at $325,000. C. 50% of Mr. Joseph's retirement account valued at $63,000. D. 50% of their joint checking and savings account valued at $19,000. C. Various prices on furniture and other household items. At this point, the man I didn't know opened his briefcase and pulled out some documents. Mr. Blasingame, let me introduce myself to you and your client. My name is Aaron DeVosier. I am an attorney and have a doctorate in corporate law. I have some documents that you may be interested in. He held out some legal papers to Celia and Blasingame. Mr. Joseph doesn't own the house on Ravenscrest. It's owned by Specialty Timbers, LLC. But, Blasingame muttered, he owns the company and— No, he isn't, Aaron interrupted. Under the corporate bylaws, the majority can nominate an owner, and in unusual cases where it might hurt the company, the majority can cancel the shares. If you turn to page 3 of the annual meeting, you'll see that a majority of the owners canceled Mr. Joseph's shares even before the divorce decree was served. At this point, Marcus shouted, "That's utter nonsense! Half of the shares are yours," Celia cried, and Blasingame was on a roll. "Whoever you are," Darren King ordered with a calm look, "one more word and you will be removed. What's more, I'll do it myself." At that moment, Marcus ran out of the room, slamming the door. Celia continued to cry, but the room was silent. Mr. Blasingame, Mr. DeVosier has reviewed all the records, certified them to the Oregon Attorney General's office. You can try to take the case all the way to the highest court, but a word of advice. It will cost your client dearly, and I might add that Mr. DeVosier has advised attorneys on far more complex corporate law matters than this. He is also, as a favor to his fraternity brother, Michael Robinson, consulting pro bono on behalf of Mr. Joseph. I was as shocked as Celia and Blasingame. Darren opened the file folder and pulled out a check. Here is a cashier's check for $25,000. This is our final offer, Mr. Blasingame. Would you like to take a few minutes to consult with your client? Yes, I'd like that, Blasingame said. We left and headed for Darren's office. I hugged Mike, hugged Darren, and when I went over to hug Aaron DeVosier, he held out his hand and said, "A handshake is enough." I laughed and shook his hand. "Thank you all, but don't I own my house?" Mike smiled and said, "Don't worry, the house is yours. When my old man contracted with Terry Peterson to buy the house, Peterson wouldn't sell it to you because he was afraid you couldn't keep up with the payments, so the old man made the payments and you paid him." I thought about it, and Aaron peeked at the deal, and today that house is owned by Specialty Timbers. As soon as it's settled, we'll put it in your name. What about my shares in the company? I asked. Do I still own 9%? No, not really, but once everything is settled, you'll own 14%, and I've bequeathed 5% to you. Truth be told, Cam, you deserve it. The company's business is doing well, and you're a big part of that. At that moment, Darren's secretary walked in and announced that Blasingame was ready to talk to us. We returned to the conference room and took our seats. Darren began, "So, Mr. Blasingame, what have you and your client decided?" "Well, Mr. King, it's not that simple. Although he doesn't own the house, Mrs. Joseph spent many hours fixing it up and working on it. What's more, while Mr. Joseph was on his many travels, it was Mrs. Joseph who took care of the house." "And?" Darren asked. Blasingame continued, "We believe that $50,000 is far more in line with what Mrs. Joseph at least deserves." At this, Darren closed the file folder, put it back in his briefcase, stood up and said, "See you in court." And Mike and Aaron DeVosier stood up as well. "Said, wait, we'll take the $25,000, muttered Blasingame. Darren pulled out the divorce certificate and Celia and I signed the agreement. I was free without incurring much expense. As Celia and Blasingame were leaving, Mike said loud enough for everyone to hear, $25,000 is a great job. We'd get to $75,000. I only heard one sob from Celia, and that was the end of it. That was a little rough, Robbie, said Aaron. Mike replied, not rough enough, my friend. We celebrated at the bar, and I happily bought it. I was so grateful for the legal advice, and especially for having Mike Robinson as a friend. Friday was a long day of work, but a good day. Things were going well. I felt so good about the support I was getting from Ted, Kim, Mike, John, and the warehouse guys. It felt good to be part of a good group of people. I was still mad at Celia, but more than anything, I was sad about the relationship. If only a couple things had gone differently, I think we could have been happy. But I also thought, should a strong relationship be so fragile? It's hard to say. I didn't realize yet that as I was leaving work, a dark car with tinted windows followed me. I didn't pay attention. I was just glad I was going back to my house. I immediately went to the back patio to have a beer after work. I sat there with my eyes closed and just exhaled. That's when I first heard them. There were 3 of them, and Marcus had a knife. Well, look what we have here. What do you want, Marcus? I asked. I was scared. I need a part of you, a few fingers, maybe a hand, maybe something else. I looked around for an escape route, and immediately the other 2 guys grabbed me. This is going to be fun, he grinned. At that moment, I heard a commotion outside the cottage, and within seconds, John, Nathan, Van, and 3 of their friends appeared in my yard. Do you need any help, boss? Actually, John, yes. Can you help show these guys the way out? Marcus started backing away, and his guys took off. John's guys grabbed them, and John grabbed Marcus. We're going to have a talk, mister, he told Marcus as he escorted them out of the yard. About an hour later, John returned alone. I thanked him and asked him how he knew they were here. I looked out of the warehouse door and saw a black car following you. I've seen those guys before, bad guys. Thank you. How can I thank you? I asked. I was grateful. Pay you back? What can I repay you with? You won't repay me. We're friends. I was moved to tears. And boss, I guarantee those guys won't come back. I didn't want to know. Epilogue. Let's move forward 5 years. There are ups and downs in business, but for us it's mostly ups. I had a new person working for me, and although he didn't know the logging business, he was smart, hardworking, and a good student. He worked in the operations department with John and the guys. His name is Chase DeVosier. Yes, that's Mike's fraternity brother Aaron's cousin, who helped me so much all those years ago. Chase didn't seem interested in college and needed a job. At first I thought I was repaying a favor, but he's doing a great job for us. Ted still comes in every day, but I think he mostly reads the paper and hangs out with old friends. Kimberly really runs the place, and I help out. I spend a lot of time traveling, but not so much anymore now that we're settled in. My personal life has improved as well. Thanks to my friendship with John and Nathan, I met Vangeli's sister. Yes, that's her name. I asked her why she was named that, and she told me, when my mom gave birth to me and I came into the world, she said it was Jelly. So cute. And she's cute. She works as a fitness instructor at the Valley Club and is in very good shape. I'm almost 10 years older than her, but she doesn't seem to mind. She's also not embarrassed that I'm not looking to remarry. She tells me, you look at another woman and kick her ass, and then I kick yours. I just smile and laugh. I never ran into Celia again or saw her looking bad or anything like that. No, I never saw her again. And to be honest, I don't even think of her much. The one time I did see Marcus walking towards me on the street, he saw me and crossed to the other side. And I am forever grateful for the people who have been in my life. Ted, Kim, Millie, John Pham, Nathan, Van, of course Jelly, but most of all Mike. I love my home and I love my company. I am a very happy person. The end. Thanks for watching. I hope you enjoyed it. So subscribe to my channel and watch the next video.